The massive ships appeared over Earth on a Tuesday morning, their hulls gleaming like silver against the blue sky. People around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up. Some screamed, others prayed. Most just stood there with their mouths open, unable to believe what they were seeing. President Martinez stood in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and scientists. The alien ships had been broadcasting the same message for 3 hours now, in perfect English and dozens of other languages. "People of Earth," the voice said, calm and pleasant. "We are the Galactic Council. We come in peace. We wish to welcome humanity into the greater community of intelligent species." Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the lead xenobiologist, was practically bouncing with excitement. "This is it," she whispered. "First contact. We're not alone." General Thompson was less enthusiastic. 12 ships, each the size of Manhattan. They could wipe us out without breaking a sweat." "But they're not," Martinez said, watching the live feeds from around the world. The alien ships just hung there, waiting. "They're talking." The first meeting took place 3 days later in Geneva. The alien delegates were surprisingly ordinary, looking tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and large eyes. They called themselves the Altarians, representatives of a council that governed the local section of the galaxy. Ambassador HFY spoke with a gentle voice that somehow reached everyone in the room clearly. "Your species has reached a critical point in its development. You have nuclear weapons, space travel, and global communications. It is time to decide whether humanity will join the galactic community or remain isolated on your single world." The negotiations went on for months. The aliens offered incredible gifts: clean energy technology, medical advances that could eliminate most diseases, and faster-than-light travel. In return, they asked only that Earth agree to certain guidelines about territorial expansion and military development. "Think of it as a neighborhood watch," HFY explained to the United Nations Assembly. "When new families move in, we help them understand the rules. No loud parties after midnight, no parking on the lawn. Simple things that help everyone get along." Most world leaders were eager to sign. The benefits were obvious, and the restrictions seemed reasonable. A few military officials expressed concerns about giving up certain weapons technologies, but they were outnumbered by politicians dreaming of medical cures and unlimited energy. Captain Sarah Chen was not at those meetings. She was 300 light years away, commanding the research vessel Prometheus as it studied an asteroid field near the Kepler system. Chen was one of the first humans to use the new faster-than-light drive the aliens had provided as a goodwill gesture during negotiations. The Prometheus was not a military ship. It carried a crew of 38 scientists and support staff, studying stellar formations and looking for resources that might benefit Earth's growing space program. Chen had been in space for most of her adult life, first as a pilot for the old chemical rocket missions, then as captain of increasingly advanced vessels. She liked the quiet of deep space. The alien FTL drive made travel between star systems almost routine, and Chen found herself thinking about what it would mean for humanity to become part of something bigger. Her grandfather had been a merchant marine, sailing between continents, when that seemed like a big journey. Now she was sailing between stars. The first attack came without warning. Chen was reviewing geological surveys in her ready room when alarms started blaring throughout the ship. She ran to the bridge to find her crew staring at the main screen in horror. The human colony on Kepler 442b was burning. Explosions lit up the night side of the planet like fireworks. The orbital platforms that provided power and communications were gone, reduced to expanding clouds of debris. "My God," whispered Dr. Park, the mission's lead physicist. "There were 50,000 people down there." Chen opened a channel to the colony's emergency frequencies. Static filled the bridge. She tried the backup channels, then the military, frequencies that were supposed to be monitored at all times. Nothing. "Unknown vessels detected. reported Lieutenant Walsh from the sensor station. 3 ships, configuration unknown, moving away from the planet at high speed. Follow them, Chen ordered. Captain, we're a research vessel. We don't have weapons. I didn't say attack them. I said follow them. The Prometheus shadowed the unknown ships for 6 hours, staying at maximum sensor range. Chen's crew worked frantically to analyze every scrap of data they could gather. The ships were fast, heavily armed, and used technology that didn't match anything in Earth's databases. When the unknown ships jumped to FTL, Chen made a decision that probably saved her life. Instead of following them through hyperspace, she turned back toward the ruined colony. The next 18 hours were the worst of Chen's career. Her crew worked around the clock, searching for survivors and trying to understand what had happened. They found escape pods scattered across the system, some with survivors, others with only corpses. The stories were all the same. Ships had appeared in orbit without warning and started firing. No demands, no negotiations, just death from the base. Sky Chen was preparing to jump back to Earth with the survivors when her communications officer picked up something interesting. A tight beam transmission, heavily encrypted, being broadcast from somewhere in the outer system. It wasn't human technology, but the Prometheus had been equipped with alien communication gear as part of the cultural exchange program. Can you decrypt it? Chen asked. Working on it now, Captain. The encryption is... Wait, I think I've got something. The message that appeared on screen made Chen's blood run cold. It was a conversation between 2 council species, discussing the successful field test of human military response capabilities. They talked about colony populations like test subjects and human defensive systems like obstacles to be measured. The humans performed as predicted, one voice said. Their military response was slow and poorly coordinated. Their ships are adequate but not exceptional. Recommendation: proceed with pacification protocol as planned. Agreed, replied another voice. The Council will express appropriate sympathy for the pirate attack and offer additional protection services. Phase 2 can begin within 1 standard cycle. Chen read the message 3 times before the full meaning sank in. The aliens who had spent months talking about peace and cooperation had orchestrated the attack on Kepler 442b. The 50,000 dead colonists were just data points in some larger plan. She was still staring at the screen when the proximity alarms went off again. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace nearby. The same ships that had destroyed the colony. They were heading straight for the Prometheus. All hands, abandon ship, Chen broadcast over the ship's intercom. This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now. While her crew evacuated, Chen worked frantically to download the intercepted transmissions and all sensor data from the attack. The information had to reach Earth. Someone had to warn them that humanity's new friends were actually their worst enemies. The first enemy missile hit the Prometheus just as Chen was sealing the data into an armored storage core. The ship shuddered and began to break apart. Chen made it to her escape pod with seconds to spare, clutching the data core as the ship exploded around her. 3 days later, the cargo freighter New Horizon found Chen's pod drifting in space. She was unconscious from oxygen deprivation, but alive. The data core was intact. When Chen finally made it back to Earth 2 weeks later, she found a world celebrating. The Galactic Council had expressed deep sorrow about the pirate attack on Kepler 442b and offered to station protective fleets in human space. Most people saw this as proof of alien friendship and concern for human welfare. Only Chen knew the truth, and now she had to figure out how to convince anyone to believe her before it was too late. Admiral Marcus Webb had been running Earth's deep space defense program for 15 years. He had gray hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of steady hands that came from making life-or-death decisions on a regular basis. When Captain Sarah Chen walked into his office carrying a sealed data core, Webb knew something was very wrong. Chen looked like she had been through hell. Her uniform was clean, but there were dark circles under her eyes and her hands shook slightly when she handed over the core. "Admiral, you need to see this. Everything we think we know about the Council is a lie." Webb had heard rumors about Chen's story. The official report said she had suffered hallucinations due to oxygen deprivation after her ship was destroyed in the same pirate attack that hit Kepler 442b. But Chen had specifically requested a meeting with Webb, and she had brought classified data that should have been destroyed with her ship. "Show me," Webb said. For the next 2 hours, Webb watched and listened as Chen laid out the evidence. The intercepted communications were damning enough, but she had also compiled sensor data from the attack, ship movement patterns, and energy signatures that told a clear story. The ships that destroyed the colony were using Council technology. More than that, they were Council ships with their identification transponders turned off. "They're testing us," Chen said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "This was all planned. They wanted to see how we would respond to an attack, how quickly our military could react, what kind of weapons we have." Webb studied the data carefully. He had spent his entire career preparing for the possibility that humanity might encounter hostile aliens. When the Council arrived offering friendship, part of him had been relieved. Part of him had also been suspicious. "Captain, I need you to understand something," Webb said finally. "If this information is correct, then we're not just dealing with a betrayal. We're dealing with an enemy that has been planning our destruction for months, maybe years. They know our capabilities better than we do." "What do we do?" Webb was quiet for a long moment. Outside his office window, he could see the lights of Geneva, where diplomats were still negotiating the final details of humanity's entry into the Galactic Council. President Martinez would be signing the Treaty of Stellar Harmony in less than a week. "First, we verify this data. I have people who can authenticate the communications and confirm the technical analysis. If it checks out, then we have a very big problem." The verification took 3 days. Webb's best intelligence analysts and computer specialists went over every byte of data Chen had recovered. They checked encryption signatures, analyzed voice patterns, and compared energy readings with known Council ship configurations. The conclusion was inescapable. The evidence was real. Webb called an emergency meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The room was deep underground beneath NORAD, shielded from electronic surveillance and equipped with the most advanced security systems on Earth. The 5 most senior military officers in the human armed forces sat around a table that had been used to plan humanity's defense since the Cold War. "Gentlemen, ladies," Webb began, "we have a problem that makes nuclear war look like a minor disagreement." He presented Chen's evidence methodically without emotion. The other officers asked technical questions, challenged assumptions, and demanded additional proof. By the end of the briefing, everyone in the room understood the situation. General Morrison, head of the Army, spoke first. "So what you're telling us is that our new alien friends are planning to exterminate the human race, and they've been testing our defenses to make sure they can do it efficiently." "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Webb replied. "Then we call off the treaty signing," said Admiral Barnes from the Navy. "We tell Martinez what we've found and prepare for war." "It's not that simple," Webb said. He activated the room's main display and showed them the latest intelligence reports. The Council has been positioning ships throughout human space for the past month. They're calling it a friendship fleet, protection against the same pirates who hit Kepler 442b. We have 37 Council vessels in our solar system right now, including 12 heavy cruisers parked 3 million kilometers from Earth. Room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. If the Council decided to attack, they could destroy Earth's major cities before humanity could mount any kind of defense. "There's more," Webb continued. "I've been doing some research into the Council's history. They've been around for over 1,000 years, and in that time, they've encountered 47 species that reached spacefaring capability. Want to guess how many of those species are still around? 12, said General Rodriguez from the Air Force. The 12 species that make up the Council. Correct. Every other species has either joined the Council or disappeared entirely. No exceptions. Webb brought up a timeline showing the pattern. Species would be contacted when they developed faster-than-light travel. They would be offered membership in the Council. Those who accepted would undergo a gradual process of integration that ended with their military forces being absorbed into the Council fleet and their governments becoming advisory bodies with no real power. Those who refused membership would face increasing pressure, economic sanctions, territorial disputes, and finally military action. They're not running a galactic government, Webb said. They're running a protection racket. Join us or die. Fee. Intelligence files made for grim reading. The Altarians, humanity's primary contact with the Council, had once been a proud warrior race with colonies across dozens of star systems. Now they served as diplomats and administrators, their military disbanded and their colonies turned into Council administrative centers. The same pattern had been repeated again and again across the galaxy. "So what's the plan?" asked Admiral Barnes. Webb had been thinking about that question for 3 days. "We have exactly 8 advantages in this situation. First, they don't know that we know about their real agenda. Second, they think they've accurately assessed our military capabilities based on the Kepler attack. Third, they're arrogant. They've never faced serious resistance from a species they've decided to absorb. Fourth, they're used to fighting species one at a time, not coordinated opposition." That's 4 advantages, General Morrison pointed out. "What are the other 4? "The other 4 are classified above your clearance level," Webb said. "But I can tell you that humanity has been preparing for interstellar conflict longer than most people realize." Webb was referring to Project Lazarus, a deep space military program that had been running in secret for almost 20 years. While the public space program focused on exploration and research, Lazarus had been developing weapon systems, ship designs, and tactical doctrines specifically for warfare against technologically superior enemies. The project had started as a response to the possibility of hostile alien contact, but it had evolved into something much more comprehensive. Hidden shipyards in the outer solar system were building vessels that incorporated the best of human engineering with reverse-engineered alien technology. The ships were smaller than Council vessels, but faster and more maneuverable, designed for hit-and-run attacks rather than direct confrontation. "I need all of you to return to your commands and begin implementing Defense Protocol 7, Webb told the assembled officers. "Do not discuss this with anyone outside your immediate staff. As far as the outside world is concerned, we're still preparing for humanity's glorious entry into galactic civilization." Defense Protocol 7 was a contingency plan that had been developed years earlier for exactly this situation. Military. Units would be quietly repositioned under the guise of routine exercises. Critical personnel would be evacuated from major population centers for training missions. Weapons systems would be tested and resupplied under cover of normal maintenance. Most importantly, contact would be established with human colonies throughout known space. Every settlement, research station, and mining operation would need to be warned about what was coming. As the meeting broke up, General Rodriguez approached Webb privately. "Marcus, even if we can coordinate a defense, we're still talking about going to war with 12 spacefaring civilizations. The odds are not in our favor." Webb nodded grimly. "The odds weren't in our favor when we fought the British Empire either, or when we stood up to the Nazis. Sometimes you fight because it's the right thing to do, not because you think you can win. And if we lose, then at least we'll go down fighting instead of walking quietly into slavery." That night, Webb sat alone in his office, staring at intelligence reports and tactical assessments. The Council's plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would demand that humanity surrender its military forces for galactic peacekeeping duties. When humanity refused, they would express regret and implement protective measures to ensure galactic stability. The end result would be the same as it had been for 35 other species: absorption or extinction. But the Council had made one critical mistake. They had given humanity access to their technology and allowed human ships to travel throughout their territory. They thought they were controlling the flow of information, but they had actually given humanity the tools it needed to plan their downfall. Webb opened a secure communication channel to Colonel Sarah Chen. The message reached Captain Tom Bradley while he was inspecting mining equipment on Titan Base, humanity's largest settlement in the outer solar system. Bradley had been expecting something like this for weeks: the sudden increase in Council, ship movements, the new security protocols that seemed designed to monitor human activities, and the stories filtering back from deep space colonies had all pointed to trouble. Bradley was not officially a military officer. Titan Base was a civilian mining operation, extracting methane and rare minerals from Saturn's largest moon. But like many colony administrators, Bradley was a former military man who had been quietly recruited for positions that might become important in a crisis. When Admiral Webb's coded message arrived, Bradley knew exactly what it meant. Attention. All personnel, Bradley announced over the base communication system. We are implementing Emergency Protocol Alpha. All civilian staff should report to their designated shelter areas immediately. All former military personnel should report to the command center. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. On research stations, mining platforms, and frontier settlements, people who had thought they were living peaceful lives as explorers and pioneers suddenly found themselves preparing for war. The secret network that Webb had spent years building came alive. Messages flashed between hidden transmitters using codes that had been developed long before the Council arrived. Supply caches that had been disguised as routine maintenance depots were opened. Personnel who had been assigned to remote locations, for seemingly random reasons, revealed their true purpose. Dr. Maria Santos received the alert while she was cataloging plant samples on New Terra, humanity's first successful colony world 200 light-years from Earth. She had been the head botanist for the colony's agricultural program, but she was also a former intelligence officer who had been monitoring Council activities in the local sector. Commander Harris, she called to the colony's military leader, we just got the go signal from Earth. How long do we need to evacuate non-essential personnel? Commander Harris was already pulling up defensive plans on his tactical display. 72. Hours to get civilians to the backup shelters, another 48 to activate the perimeter defenses. New Terra was one of humanity's showcase colonies, a green world with breathable atmosphere and abundant resources. It was also a carefully designed military stronghold. The farms and research facilities were real, but they had been built around a network of underground bunkers and weapon emplacements. The hydroelectric dams that powered the colony also concealed missile launchers. The orbital solar collectors could be reconfigured as high-energy particle beams. Similar preparations were taking place throughout human territory. What the Council saw as a scattered collection of primitive settlements was actually a coordinated defense network that had been years in the making. On Earth, the public preparations were more delicate. President Martinez was still planning to sign the treaty with the Council in 3 days. As far as most of the world knew, humanity was about to join a peaceful galactic civilization. The military mobilization had to be hidden behind routine exercises and normal rotations. Admiral Webb stood in the command center of Project Lazarus, deep beneath the surface of Ceres asteroid. The facility had been carved out of solid rock over the course of 15 years, disguised as a mining operation, while actually serving as humanity's secret military headquarters. Status report, Webb ordered as he entered the main operations room. Colonel Martinez, the project's chief of staff, looked up from a bank of displays showing ship movements throughout the solar system. All Lazarus vessels are now operational. We have 47 ships ready for immediate deployment, with another 23 completing final systems checks. Webb nodded. The Lazarus fleet was humanity's ace in the hole. While the Council thought, Earth's military consisted of chemical rockets and primitive fusion drives. The real human fleet was equipped with technology that would surprise them. The ships were built using a combination of human engineering and reverse-engineered Council technology. Earth's scientists had been studying every piece of alien equipment they could get their hands on, supposedly to help with peaceful integration. In reality, they had been learning how to build better weapons. "What about our intelligence assets?" Webb asked. "All deep cover operatives are in position," reported Major Kim from the intelligence section. "We have people on 12 Council worlds, plus monitoring stations at every major fleet concentration. The moment they begin moving ships for an assault, we'll know about it." The intelligence network was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement. Over the past year, as human diplomats and scientists had visited Council worlds for cultural exchanges, carefully selected operatives had been left behind. To the Council, they appeared to be researchers and cultural attachés. In reality, they were trained saboteurs and intelligence gatherers. "Any word from the colonies?" Webb asked. "New Terra reports ready. Kepler Station is evacuating civilians but should be combat-ready within 18 hours. The mining operations in the Centauri system are activating their defensive measures now," Webb walked over to the main tactical display, which showed the positions of known Council ships throughout human space. Red icons marked hostile vessels, while blue icons showed human defensive positions. The display looked like a chessboard where humanity was outnumbered 3-1. "Colonel, show me the latest analysis of Council fleet movements." The display shifted to show ship tracks over the past week. Council vessels had been steadily moving into position around human colonies and strategic locations. To anyone watching, it looked like a protective deployment. To trained military analysts, it looked like the beginning of a coordinated attack. "They're following standard Council doctrine," Colonel Martinez explained. "Surround the target's major population centers, cut off their supply lines, then demand surrender. If the target refuses, they begin systematic bombardment of military and industrial facilities." "How long before they're fully deployed?" "Based on current movement patterns, they'll be in final attack positions within 96 hours. Webb nodded grimly. The timing was not coincidental. The Council planned to have humanity completely surrounded before the treaty signing ceremony. If Earth's leaders refused to sign, the attack would begin immediately. If they did sign, the attack would come later, once humanity's guard was down. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority message from President Martinez's office. The Council has requested that the treaty signing be moved up to tomorrow." Webb felt a chill run down his spine. The Council was accelerating their timeline. Something had made them nervous. "Send a message to all unit commanders," Webb ordered. "Operation Lazarus is now active. All ships are to move to final positions immediately." The next 24 hours were the most intense in human history. While the world watched treaty negotiations on television, thinking they were witnessing humanity's entry into a galactic community, the real battle was already beginning. Human ships moved through space using trajectories that looked routine, but actually positioned them for maximum tactical advantage. The Lazarus fleet used stealth technology adapted from Council designs, making them nearly invisible to standard sensors. Supply convoys that appeared to be carrying trade goods were actually moving weapons and ammunition to forward positions. On Council worlds, human operatives began the final phase of their missions. Dr. James Park, supposedly a cultural anthropologist studying Altarian society, placed the last of his electromagnetic pulse devices near the planet's main communication center. Lieutenant Sarah Wong, who had been working as a civilian contractor on a Council shipyard, activated dormant computer viruses that would disable automated defense systems. The most dangerous mission fell to Commander Lisa Zhang, who had spent 6 months as part of a scientific exchange on the Council's military headquarters world. Her job was to gather intelligence on their command structure and, when the time came, to eliminate as many senior Council leaders as possible. "All stations report ready." Colonel Martinez announced as the countdown entered its final hours. Webb looked around the command center at the faces of his staff. These men and women had spent years preparing for this moment, knowing they might never see their families again. The plan they had developed was ambitious, risky, and probably insane. They were about to take on an enemy that had conquered dozens of civilizations and controlled a significant portion of the galaxy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb said quietly, "in approximately 6 hours, the Council is going to demand that humanity surrender. When President Martinez refuses, they will begin attacking our colonies and orbital installations. That's when we find out whether all our preparation was worth anything." "What if the President doesn't refuse?" asked Major Kim. Webb smiled grimly. "Then we'll have to make the refusal for him. One way or another, humanity is going to fight." Outside the command center, the final preparations continued. Weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment were brought online. Communication. Networks that appeared to be commercial were switched to military frequencies. Ships that had been registered as cargo. President Martinez stood in the Treaty Hall in Geneva, facing Ambassador HFY and the assembled Council delegation. The entire world was watching as humanity prepared to take its place among the stars. Behind the cameras and diplomats, however, Martinez could see the faces of his security detail, all of whom knew what was really about to happen. "Mr. President," HFY said in his calm, pleasant voice, "the Galactic Council is pleased to welcome humanity into our community. All that remains is your signature on the final documents." Martinez looked down at the papers in front of him. The treaty was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity would gain access to advanced technology, medical knowledge, and peaceful expansion opportunities. In return, Earth would place its military forces under Council oversight and accept guidance on territorial development. "Ambassador," Martinez said slowly, "I have some concerns about the military provisions. Why does the Council need direct command of human forces?" HFY's expression didn't change, but Martinez caught a brief flash of something cold in the alien's large eyes. "Mr. President, surely you understand that galactic peace requires coordination. Individual species cannot be allowed to pursue military development without oversight. This has always been Council policy. And what happens if we decline to sign?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. Martinez could feel the tension from his security team, and he noticed that the Council delegates had shifted slightly, as if preparing for something. "That would be unfortunate," HFY replied. "The galaxy can be a dangerous place for unprotected worlds. Without Council protection, humanity might face the same fate as the pirates who attacked your colony. At Kepler 442b, it was a threat, delivered with the same pleasant tone the ambassador had used throughout the negotiations. Martinez felt his jaw tighten. Even if he hadn't known about Captain Chen's evidence, that statement would have told him everything he needed to know about the Council's true intentions. "I see," Martinez said. He picked up his pen and held it over the signature line. Around the world, millions of people held their breath. Then Martinez set the pen down and stood up. "Ambassador HFY, on behalf of the human race, I decline to sign this treaty. Furthermore, I am formally ordering all Council vessels to leave human space immediately." The reaction was immediate. HFY's pleasant expression vanished, replaced by something that looked almost reptilian despite his humanoid features. The other Council delegates began speaking rapidly in their own languages, clearly agitated. "Mr. President," HFY said, his voice now carrying an unmistakable threat, "you are making a grave mistake. The Council cannot allow an uncontrolled military species to threaten galactic stability. If you will not accept our guidance voluntarily, then protective measures must be implemented." "Get out," Martinez said quietly. As the Council delegation filed out of the Treaty Hall, Martinez knew that the clock was now ticking. According to Admiral Webb's intelligence, Council attack fleets would begin moving within minutes of a treaty rejection. Humanity had perhaps 2 hours before the shooting started. Martinez activated his secure communication link to NORAD. Admiral? Webb. They just left. How long do we have? Less time than we hoped, Mr. President. Webb's voice came back immediately. Council ships are already beginning to move. Their lead elements will be in attack position within 90 minutes. High. Above Earth's atmosphere, the Council fleet began its final approach. 12 heavy cruisers and their escort vessels moved toward the planet in perfect formation, their weapons charging and targeting systems coming online. To Council Admiral Thex Miran, this was routine. He had overseen the pacification of 6 other species over his long career. Humans would surrender quickly once they realized the futility of resistance. What Admiral Thex Miran didn't know was that his every move was being watched by sensors that he couldn't detect, operated by humans, who had spent years learning to hide from Council technology. Contact, reported Lieutenant Torres from the Lazarus Command Center. Council fleet is beginning final approach to Earth. Estimated time to weapons range, 73 minutes. Admiral Webb stood at the Central Command Station, surrounded by displays showing ship movements throughout the solar system. For years, he had prepared for this moment. Now he would find out whether human ingenuity could overcome superior numbers and technology. Signal all units, Webb ordered. Operation Lazarus is now active. Repeat, Operation Lazarus is active. The response was immediate. Throughout human space, ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and behind planetary bodies began moving toward their targets. The Lazarus fleet, 47 vessels that the Council didn't even know existed, emerged from concealment and began their attack run. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the lead ship of the assault, a vessel called the Defiant, that had been built specifically for this mission. Like all Lazarus ships, the Defiant was smaller than Council vessels, but carried weapons that would surprise their enemies. All stations report ready, Rodriguez's tactical officer announced. We have target lock on the Council flagship. Remember, Rodriguez said to her crew, we're not trying to match them ship for ship. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we don't stay around for a fair fight. Humanity's survival depends on us being smarter, not stronger. The first blow of the war was struck not by ships, but by the human operatives who had been placed on Council, worlds months earlier. Dr. James Park, the supposed anthropologist on the Altarian homeworld, activated his electromagnetic pulse devices just as the Council fleet began its attack run. The planet's communication systems went down, cutting off contact with their ships in human space. On the military headquarters world, Commander Lisa Zhang emerged from her cover and began systematically eliminating Council command staff. Her mission was simple: create as much chaos as possible in the enemy command structure just as the battle began. Similar acts of sabotage occurred across Council territory. Supply depots exploded. Communication networks went dark. Computer viruses that had been dormant for months suddenly activated, causing automated defense systems to malfunction or turn on their own ships. The Council fleet approaching Earth suddenly found itself cut off from higher command, with no way to coordinate with other Council forces or receive updated intelligence about human capabilities. What is happening? Admiral Thex Miran demanded as his communication officer struggled to re-establish contact with fleet headquarters. Unknown, sir. All subspace channels are being jammed or are simply not responding. It's as if our entire communication network has gone offline. Before the Admiral could respond, his tactical officer shouted a warning. Multiple contacts approaching from the asteroid belt. Configuration unknown. The Lazarus fleet hit the Council ships like a swarm of angry hornets. The human vessels were fast and maneuverable, darting between the larger Council ships and striking at their most vulnerable points. Instead of trying to match the aliens' heavy weapons, the human ships used rapid-fire missile salvos and precision energy weapons to target specific systems. Captain Rodriguez brought the Defiant in close to the Council flagship, her ship's advanced stealth systems making it nearly invisible until the moment of attack. "Fire," she ordered, and a spread of 6 antimatter torpedoes slammed into the alien ship's engine section. The Council ship lurched as its propulsion failed, leaving it spinning helplessly in space. Before its crew could recover, 3 more Lazarus vessels appeared and finished it off with concentrated fire. Throughout the battle zone, the pattern repeated. Council ships that had expected to face primitive human vessels instead found themselves under attack by enemies they couldn't track or predict. The rigid formations that had served the Council well in previous campaigns became death traps as human ships attacked from unexpected angles. "This is impossible!" Admiral Thexmeron shouted as his fleet began to come apart around him. "How do they have this technology?" The answer was simple. Humanity had been learning from the Council's own equipment for months, reverse engineering their technology and improving on it. The Lazarus ships were built with Council drive systems, Council weapons, and Council shields, but they were designed by humans who understood that flexibility and speed could overcome raw firepower. As the battle raged around Earth, similar conflicts were breaking out across human space. Council fleets that had positioned themselves to attack human colonies found themselves under assault by defenders who seemed to appear out of nowhere. On New Terra, Commander Harris watched from his underground command bunker as orbital defense. Platforms that had been disguised as research satellites opened fire on the approaching Council ships. The platforms were small and individually weak, but there were dozens of them, and they attacked with coordinated precision that confused the enemy targeting systems. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the Council ships are breaking formation. They're trying to retreat." "Don't let them," Harris ordered. "Signal the fleet. No Council ship leaves this system." The battle for New Terra lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the human colony was still intact, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been a Council attack fleet. 6 months after the first shots were fired, Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching the final Council stronghold burn. The planet below had once been the seat of galactic power, home to the High Council that had ruled dozens of species for over 1,000 years. Now, it was just another world liberated by the human-led alliance. The war had not gone as anyone expected. The Council's initial advantage in numbers and technology had been offset by their complete inability to adapt to human tactics. Worse, for them, humanity's broadcast of the truth about Council methods had triggered rebellions across the galaxy. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the communications station, "we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Council ships in orbit. That's the last of their fleet." Webb nodded but felt no satisfaction. The war had been necessary, but the cost had been enormous. Billions had died across dozens of worlds. Entire civilizations had been caught in the crossfire between the Councils. Desire to maintain control and humanity's determination to destroy their oppressive system. "Signal the fleet," Webb ordered. "Cease fire. Begin rescue operations for survivors." The transformation of the galaxy had begun with humanity's refusal to submit, but it had spread far beyond what Webb had originally planned. The Zephyrians, one of the first species to join the human alliance, had brought with them knowledge of Council prison worlds where dissidents had been held for centuries. The hegemony of Kroll had contributed their massive industrial capacity to build ships for the rebellion. Even some Council species had eventually turned against their own leadership once the truth became undeniable. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic officer, appeared on the main screen from the diplomatic vessel that had just entered orbit. "Admiral, the Council leadership is requesting a meeting. They want to discuss terms." "After everything they've done, they want to negotiate?" "It appears so. Ambassador Keth Var specifically requested to speak with you personally." Webb considered the request. Keth Var had been the face of the Council throughout the initial contact with humanity. He had delivered their threats with a smile and planned their extermination with calm efficiency. Part of Webb wanted to refuse the meeting entirely, but the human admiral had learned over the past 6 months that leadership sometimes meant making difficult choices for the greater good. "Tell them I'll meet with them, but it will be on our terms, in our location, with our security." The meeting took place aboard the Indomitable 3 days later. HFY looked different from the confident diplomat who had threatened humanity 6 months earlier. His pale blue skin had taken on a grayish tone, and his large eyes showed something that Webb had never seen in them before: fear. "Admiral Webb," HFY said as he was escorted into the conference room, "I come to discuss the terms of our surrender." "There are no terms," Webb replied flatly. "The council is finished. Your government is dissolved, your military is defeated, and your authority over other species has ended. The only question is what happens to your people now." HFY's expression showed confusion. "But surely you intend to establish your own hegemony? Humanity has proven its superiority. It is only natural that you would take our place as the dominant power." Webb leaned back in his chair, studying the alien diplomat. "That's your mistake, Ambassador. You think this war was about replacing your tyranny with our own. It wasn't. This war was about ending tyranny entirely." "I don't understand." Dr. Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the new galactic charter that had been drafted by the Alliance of Free Species. "We're establishing a democratic confederation, Ambassador. Every species gets representation based on their population and contribution to the common good. No single race will have the power to dominate others." HFY stared at the document as if it were written in an alien language. "This is impossible. How can you maintain order without clear hierarchy? How can you make decisions without strong leadership? The same way humanity learned to govern itself," Webb said, "through debate, compromise, and the consent of the governed. It's messy and sometimes slow, but it's better than the alternative." The former council leader looked genuinely baffled. "Your species could rule the galaxy. You have proven your military superiority. Your technology is now more advanced than ours. Your people have shown remarkable leadership capabilities. Why would you give up that power?" Webb thought about the question for a moment. "Because we've seen what happens when one group has too much power over others. We've studied the history of every species you've conquered. We know how your system works, and we know where it leads." He activated another display showing the fate of the 35 species that had been absorbed or eliminated by the Council over the past millennium. "You started as explorers and pioneers just like us. But somewhere along the way, you decided that your way was the only way. You convinced yourselves that other species needed your guidance, your protection, your control. We brought order to chaos," HFY protested. "We prevented wars, eliminated poverty, created stability." "You created slavery," Dr. Rodriguez said sharply. "You eliminated diversity, creativity, and freedom. You turned dozens of proud civilizations into administrative districts." Webb stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the planet below. The Altarians used to be warriors and artists. The hegemony of Kroll were master engineers who built wonders that spanned star systems. The Zephyrians were explorers who mapped half the galaxy. All of them had their own cultures, their own dreams, their own ways of solving problems. He turned back to HFY. "You took all of that away. You decided that efficiency was more important than freedom, that order was more valuable than creativity. You created a galaxy of servants instead of a community of equals." "And what makes you think your system will work better?" HFY asked. "Because we're not trying to control it," Webb replied. "We're trying to make sure that no one else can control it either." The conversation continued for several hours as Webb and Rodriguez explained the structure of the new Galactic Confederation. Each member species would retain autonomy over their internal affairs while participating in collective decisions about trade, exploration, and mutual defense. Disputes would be resolved through arbitration rather than military force. Scientific. and cultural exchange would be encouraged rather than regulated. Kethvar listened with growing amazement. "You are truly planning to give up the power you have won?" "We're planning to share it," Webb corrected. "That's how democracies work. But what if other species make decisions you disagree with? What if they choose policies that harm their own people or threaten galactic stability?" Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "Then we'll try to convince them they're wrong. If that doesn't work, we'll accept that different species might have different solutions to their problems. As long as they're not threatening others, they have the right to make their own mistakes." "This will lead to chaos," Kethvar predicted. "Maybe," Webb admitted, "but it will be the chaos of freedom, not the order of oppression. We'd rather deal with the problems of democracy than the problems of tyranny." Over the following weeks, the transition began. Council administrative systems were dismantled and replaced with representative assemblies. Military forces were reorganized as a collective defense force with rotating leadership. Species that had been suppressed for generations began to rediscover their own cultures and traditions. Not everything went smoothly. Some species struggled with the concept of self-governance after centuries of being told what to do. Others had to be restrained from seeking revenge against former council loyalists. Several border disputes erupted as worlds tried to reclaim territory that had been lost during the council era. But humanity's approach to these problems was radically different from the council's methods. Instead of imposing solutions from above, human mediators worked to help the disputing parties find their own agreements. Instead of using military force to maintain order, they relied on economic incentives and diplomatic pressure. Admiral Webb found himself serving as the first president of the Galactic Confederation, a position he had never wanted but accepted. As a temporary necessity, his first act was to establish a rotating presidency, ensuring that no single species or individual could accumulate too much power. "The galaxy is free," he announced in his inaugural address, broadcast to every member world. "But freedom is not a destination, it's a journey. We will make mistakes. We will face challenges. Some of our experiments in self-governance will fail, but we will face these problems as equals, not as masters and servants." The speech was heard on Earth, where President Martinez was dealing with the challenges of integrating humanity into the larger galactic community. It was heard on New Terra, where Commander Harris was helping establish the Confederation's first integrated military academy. It was heard on dozens of worlds where species were learning to govern themselves for the first time in generations. Perhaps, most importantly, it was heard by young beings of every species who would grow up in a galaxy where their potential was limited only by their own efforts, not by the arbitrary decisions of distant rulers. Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding the exploration vessel New